we're lucky because for Career Week, it's always nice to have someone who will help talk about a particular career. And in this case, we have somebody who's going to talk about how to get started in a particular career, a legal career and such. So we're lucky enough to have Byrd with us. He is the admissions director for the University of Iowa. He has a lot of good things that he'll be able to provide us with. I'm going to let him get started. Keep in mind there'll be some students who work till like 5, so they may be coming in as you go along. Don't be offended. And if you have not signed up, please do sign up. There's a sign-up sheet passing around, so just before you leave, make sure you have that taken care of. We will be going until about 5:50, 5:55. If you have a class, then go ahead and leave. But since I have my class afterwards, if you want to stick around for a few minutes later, that's absolutely fine. So like I say, if you have a class and you see that it's time to go ahead and go. If you're already in my class, or you do not have another class, then feel free to just stick around in here. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Weil. And thank you for inviting me. Give you a quick update as to how all this got going. I'm at the Miami Law School Forum, and Mr. Stephen Comstock comes by and says, you know, and I paraphrase here, I may not remember the details exactly, but he said, you know, we've never had anyone come and talk about law school admissions.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello.
Good to see you.
Legal Society meeting?
Yes.
My name is Ben Goldenberg, calling to the Legal Society meeting.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing.
Okay, well, we're starting now, so
Okay.
go ahead and listen.
Okay, we're here and we're up and going. All right. So he said, would you be interested in having someone come and talk about law school admissions? I said, sure. Fall is a travel season. So I thought, okay, what the heck? So then he hooked me up with Dr. Weil, and we talked on the phone, we set up the meeting. Next thing you know, I find out that he and I, at one point in our lives, lived within 8 miles of each other. Because he went to law school in the state of Minnesota and lived in the state of Minnesota for a number of years, and I lived in Minnesota for 23 years. I just found out about this today, just a few minutes ago. So to show you how small the world is and how things work out. Okay, I'm going to talk about law school admissions, and I'm going to use the University of Iowa Law School as kind of a model of things that we think about and worry about. But you can generalize this, because I've had the good fortune of having worked at a number of different schools. Schools that are regionally known, schools that are nationally known, schools that are all over the board. Freestanding and private, full-time, part-time programs like William Mitchell. So there are a lot of different kinds of schools out there, but hopefully this will give you some ideas to what to think about.
You can tap the smart board too. If you just tap it once, it'll proceed forward also.
Okay. All right. What's the smart board?
That is it. So, yep, just tap that when you're ready to go on to the next slide.
Board is smarter than I am. I thought I was some kind of a stud. Forget about that, you know. All right. You learn something new every day. Here is the first thing that I want you all to think about if you're thinking about law school. And it actually has little to nothing to do with law school. It has everything to do with what you want to do with yourselves when you're done with your educational experience. Let's take a look at this one. You must first be who you really are, then do what you need to do in order to have what you want. Be who you are. Don't forsake who you are or what drives you or what your passions are just because someone out there is telling you to go to law school. Don't forsake who you are. Get involved in activities and things that you want to get involved in because you want to do it. Not because Dr. Weil or myself or your mom or your dad or crazy Uncle Lou or whoever out there is out there telling you law school is what you ought to do. Take a time out. Just ask yourself what you want to do. Secondly, what problems would you attempt to solve if you knew that you could not fail? That's a good one. If you knew that failure was not an option, what would you still want to do with yourself? That's really, really key. And then the third is the one that I think is probably the most practical. The end is the beginning. What I tell students to do when they're thinking about careers or whether or not to go to law school or some kind of graduate school, don't think about what you want to do on the day you graduate. Because there's a better than 50-50 chance that your mind's going to change. At the University of Iowa Law School, 50% of the people who enter the program are clueless as to what they want to do. They say something wonderful and nice in the personal statement. That's okay. They say something wonderful and nice in the personal statement, but frankly, they don't know. They come in wanting to do this, and they get out doing that, and it's a perfect fit for them, whatever it is they end up doing. 50% of them. 40% have a clue, but are going to change their minds. They want to do criminal law, and they are determined to do criminal law, and they are going to do everything they can to do criminal law, but when they start law school, they say criminal law, and then they're going to get involved in tax law, corporate law, do a clinic, dealing with immigration law, do another clinic, dealing with taxation. I mean, they're going to go all over the board. They'll still end up doing criminal law. But the shortest distance between 2 points in real life is not a straight line. It goes like this. And then you get about 10% who not only have a clue, but are linear in how they want to go through. They want to do this kind of law, and doggone it, that's where they're going. And I can usually tell you what categories those folks fall into. They want to go into environmental law, public interest law, intellectual property law, or civil rights. Because the passion for those issues is so great that it's just driving them to get a degree and to solve problems within those areas. So 90% of the people either have no clue at all or have some idea, but only about 10% really know for sure what they want to do. Now, all that said, I like to see people who have some idea as to what they want to do. It's nice to know why you want to go to law school or why you don't want to go. Knowing what you don't want to do is just as important as knowing what you do want to do. All that said, have some idea as to why you want to go. But we know that in law school, you're going to change your mind. We'll come back and address that a little bit later. What do I tap?
Just double tap. Try to double tap. Okay. It's not as smart as we think it is, I guess. Yeah, it's all right. The light's green, so.
All right, we'll do this.
You'll get your exercise.
It's no big deal. That's fine. All right. So let's say, for the time being, you have figured out what passions you have, what problems you want to solve, and you say, okay, the law degree is the degree that is going to get me there. Remember that last thing on the previous chart? Figure out what you want to do and kind of work your way back. That was the whole point of that third bullet point. Figure out what you want to do and then work backwards to the degree that will get you there. Don't figure out what degree you want to get and then figure out what problems you want to solve. That's the wrong way to do it. But once you have figured out what problems you want to solve and what degree is best for you for solving those problems, here are the things that law school is going to make you do. Law school is going to make you read a lot.
Sorry.
Hey, Chris, I'm just messing with you. Law school is going to make you read a lot. More than you ever thought you'd want to read. Law school is going to make you write a lot. A lot. Writing probably is the most important skill that you can bring to law school. Law school is going to make you rewrite a lot. That actually may be a more important skill than the actual writing part. Law school is going to make you research a lot. My wife is a lawyer. She's been a lawyer for 25 years, and she says that the practice of law is like writing a lifelong term paper. And the only thing that changes are your clients, and that represents chapters in your term paper. As the clients change, the chapters change. It's like writing a term paper your entire life. So you've got to know how to write and rewrite, and be patient with papers that come back to you with all red marks and everything. That's just the process of learning how to be a good writer, or learning how to write like a lawyer. Law school is going to make you speak in public. That's a very important skill, whether it is a group or a classroom of 15 or 20 people, or a country of 300 million people. You have to be able to get up in front of somebody at some point and speak your piece. Law school is going to make you think critically. Never believe everything that you see, read, or hear. There are always three sides to a story. There's side A, side B, and somewhere in the middle is this thing called truth. Which, by the way, you will not find truth or justice in law school. But you will learn techniques and skills that will kind of help you find it. You will not find it in law school, and frankly, you may not find it in life. But the whole point of law school is to give you the skills and techniques in your search for truth and justice. The final thing, possess a healthy respect for history. Judges make decisions based on precedent. Precedent is just another name for history. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a history major. One thing about law school, you can major in anything. I'll give you a quick example. And again, I'm just using Iowa as an example, but I've worked at William Mitchell College of Law. I've worked at University of Minnesota Law School. I've worked at a lot of different law schools and have been doing this for 21 years. So I've seen how a lot of different schools operate. In last year's entering class at the University of Iowa Law School, I had 203 people. My target every year is 200. I ended up with 203. I had 51 different majors represented in that first year class. 22% of my entering class majored in political science. That's the single largest major of any one major in the entering class. But flip that number around. If 22% majored in one thing, political science, that means that 78% of my entering class majored in 50 other things. So don't think you need to be a political science major to go to law school. You don't. I have engineering majors, math majors, English majors, philosophy majors, economics majors. Like I said before, follow your passion. Find that thing that is driving you to solve certain problems or driving you to be intellectually connected and motivated, and just follow that. Dance, drama, fine, not a problem. There are things you can learn in any major that will help you in law school. Okay, so you've decided that the law degree is what you want to do, that there are things about law school that are interesting to you, reading, writing, research, speaking in public, all of that. And you have a sense that law school is going to be the connecting point for you. What do law school admissions offices look at? Well, we look at both academic factors and non-academic factors. But here we're going to talk about the academic factors. You have your LSAT, the law school admission test, and you have your cumulative undergraduate GPA. I know Dr. Wild has some information about the LSAT that he'll be able to share with you a little bit later. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. But again, there are 8-week-long seminars on the LSAT given. So for me to spend too much time on it would be crazy. But I do need to acknowledge that it is an important part of the process. But not as important as you think, and I'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about the LSAT. The law school admission test is a standardized test. It's given 4 times a year. It's given in February, June, September, October, and December. If you are interested in applying to law school, it is important to apply or to take the test the year prior to when you want to start law school. So, if you're interested in entering law school, let's say in mid-August of 2011, which is the next time our class starts, it would have been important to have taken the LSAT in June, October, or December of 2010. Now, February of 2011 is given, and it is a test that you could take, and we will accept that score. The problem with the February test is that it comes so late in the cycle that a number of things may not be available for you. Number one, we may not have a lot of room, because I work on a rolling admissions basis, which, if you're not familiar with that, as files come in and become complete, I read them and make decisions. In fact, this morning I spent pretty much 4 hours reading files online. We have an online process where I can get files online and read them while I'm in my hotel room. I read files this morning for 4 hours and was making decisions on applications. Those files are going to be fine because I have plenty of room, I have plenty of scholarship money, nothing wrong there. But that February test, the result of that test comes after the first week of March, after March 1st. And my application deadline is March 1st. Now, I'll still read the file. If everything else is in, I'll have to wait until March 1st and I'll still read the file. But I may have run out of room in the entering class. I may have run out of scholarship money. You don't have as much time to make a decision as to whether or not you want to go to my school or some other school. Instead of having a couple of months, you may have a couple of weeks. So there are a lot of benefits to applying earlier in the cycle. So that's the only problem with the February test. unless you're planning on applying in, say, 2012, then you can take February because you have about a year and a half to think about it. Okay? All right. It's given 4 times a year. There's a reading comprehension section. There's an analytical reasoning section. There are 2 logical reasoning sections. Then there's 1 variable section, or some may call that the experimental section. Now, the thing about the Lsat is the sections that you take in the test will vary depending on the booklet that's given to you. And you don't know which section is going to be the variable or experimental section. They're using that section basically to test questions that they may use in a future test administration. So that variable section will not be included in your score. But you don't know which one it is. It could be the first one, the second, third, or fourth one, or the 5th one. So what you have to do is just do well on all of them. Do the best you can on all of the sections. These 4 sections here, the reading comprehension section, the analytical reasoning section, and the 2 logical reasoning sections will count in your score. Those 4 will be a part of your score. But that variable section, that experimental section will not. And then there's the very final thing on all of the exams is a 35-minute writing sample that comes at the end of the test. It's a pain in the butt, but it's an equal opportunity pain in the butt. You just have to deal with it. Like I said, writing is the most important skill that you can bring to law school. And so we want to test and check that out. And most schools that will take your application will look at that writing sample. I can't think of too many schools that won't look at it seriously, even with the handwriting, because it's handwritten. So sometimes you get these writing samples and you have no idea what those people are talking about. But you have to kind of work through it. Of all the parts of the application that I have to read, that one takes the longest time, because most people don't write very well in terms of legible handwriting. And I'm terrible at it myself, so I'm not busting anybody's chops. Okay, the keys to doing well on the LSAT: you have to be organized, you have to be able to manage information and organize the information, and your critical skill thoughts are important. Yes, ma'am?
I'm sorry, I have a question about the writing sample. What sorts of things are you looking for? Are you looking for writing style, grammar?
Yeah, it's a good question. On the writing sample, the 35-minute writing sample, they're going to give you a vignette, a situation. And then they're going to give you choice A and choice B. They're going to give you the situation and say, okay, what would you do? Would you do choice A? And they give you a little example of what choice A is, or what would you choose choice B? What we're looking for is for you to, number 1, make a decision. Which one would you choose, based on having thought about and analyzed the situation? Support and give us some reasons why you made the choice you did. And then here's the important one. Support the reasons why you didn't choose the other one. That's really, really important. A lot of people will say, okay, well, here's the situation, I choose A, and here's why I choose A. And they don't tell me why they didn't choose B.
So you're looking for compare and contrast?
Yes. Yes. One of the, and this goes back a way, but I heard someone say once that the definition of a really intelligent person is someone who can hold 2 opposing views and still remain functional. And this is your opportunity to make a decision and hold a certain viewpoint, but understand the opposing viewpoint. And tell us why that opposing viewpoint is not the right answer, not the right choice. Who knows what the right answer is, but it's not the right choice. So that's a good question and very important. Tell us why you chose the one you did, and tell us why you didn't choose the one that you didn't choose.
Thank you.
No problem. 4 key points about the LSAT, and this is just based on my own thoughts, just having worked with this for 20-some years now. The Lsat GPA combination is a valid, reliable predictor of first-year law school performance. And there are a lot of studies and analytical tools that we have to support that. The Lsat alone isn't good for much of anything, except how you did on a Saturday morning on some standardized test, or how much sleep you got Friday night, or how much you partied Friday night. I don't know. The Lsat alone doesn't tell me much of anything. But that LSAT combined with your undergrad GPA is a pretty good indicator of first-year law school performance. It's not perfect, and it's not the only thing we look at, and I'll get to that in a minute, but it is a pretty good indicator. Secondly, the LSAT cannot be inflated. The LSAT score scale goes from 120 to 180. How many people in the room are familiar with the LSAT? Okay, about 3 or 4. Okay. The lowest score you can get on the LSAT is a 120. You get 120 points for answering a question. You don't even have to get it right. Just fill in a bubble and then get up and walk out like you're all that in a bag of chips. You won't get into any law schools anywhere, but you'll have 120 points where you can say, doggone it, I kicked butt and took names on that LSAT, didn't I? I got 120 points. Remind the people that you're saying that to, that 120 points is like the lowest score you can get. The highest score you can get is 180 points. You can actually get 1 or 2 questions wrong and still get 180 points. Last year, there were 87,000 people around the world who took the LSAT. 56 of them got 180. Out of 87,000, actually 87,500 people, 56 got a perfect score. It is hard to do a perfect score on the test. So if you can get a perfect score, that's great. But if you don't worry about it. Because 99% of the people didn't. Do the best you can on it. Okay? But you cannot talk yourself out of a 120 and into a 180. Okay? You can't do it. Number 3, the LSAT is designed to predict first-year law school performance. Nothing else. It is not an IQ test. It is not a test that it should not be used for med school, business school, or anything else. It is used to help us measure first-year law school performance, and that's it. Nothing else. So if anyone tries to make judgments about you because you got a 140 or 150 or 160, tell them where to go. Because that's not what the test is about. And that comes from the people who write the test. Okay, that's not just me talking. These are the people who write the LSAT in Pennsylvania. And I know those people well. I've worked with them for a long time. They're great folks. They'll tell you this stuff as well. Final thing, the LSAT is a common indicator or a common tool. It is not a common denominator. A lot of people say, well, you need a test, you need something that everyone has to take to kind of put everyone on an even keel. Well, the LSAT, maybe so, but the LSAT is not a good indicator of that because people have a different start. There are people who go to really good private schools, people go to really good public schools, people go to challenging or not so challenging public schools. The educational system and the educational starting point for people in this country is so different that it's really hard to come up with a standard test and a common denominator. And the LSAT acknowledges that. So we don't look at it as a common denominator. It is a common tool that we use with your GPA to measure first-year law school performance. Okay. Hopefully I didn't spend too much time on the LSAT, but it is something that all schools are going to look at, and I wanted to make sure that you guys understood that part. And we'll talk a little bit more later about how much it weighs or doesn't weigh. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your cumulative undergrad GPA. You will look at your cumulative undergraduate GPA. Doesn't matter what you majored in, just major in something you have a passion for. That's all I ask you to do. Graduate school GPAs are usually not considered. Most graduate school GPAs are somewhat inflated, so we're really careful about how much weight we put on an actual GPA in grad school. I will give people credit for having earned a graduate degree, because people who have a graduate degree know what it takes to do graduate level work. They know how to turn it up a notch. And so I acknowledge that part. But I don't put a lot of weight into whatever the GPA is quantitatively, because who knows what that means. And a lot of that has to do with educational politics that has nothing to do with you. It's not a slam on you. It's more of a slam on graduate education in this country and the politics behind why some GPAs and departments are higher and lower and all that stuff. So we won't get into that. But I'll give you credit for having earned the degree. We take a look at trends across time. We will have your cumulative undergrad GPA, but I'll also take a look at your second half GPA. Because let's say you had a slow start for any number of reasons. You know, you're working your way through school, you got family to take care of, you got all kinds of things going on. Maybe your priorities are mixed up your first year or two when you're in school. And then sometime around the middle of the program, the earlier the better, but sometime around the middle of the program, motivation kicks in. You remember why you're here. And all of a sudden you have a trend up. Maybe you choose a major that acknowledges that passion that I was talking about. You say, okay, now I have a sense of focus. Now I've gotten through these courses that I'm really not interested in, and now I can focus on the stuff that I'm really interested in. You tend to have a trend up in your GPA. We'll acknowledge that. So I'll actually take a look at your second half GPA and give you some credit for that trend up. And most of the time, it is a trend up. The quality of the Greek writing institution, this is an important tiebreaker. I mean, I'm going to acknowledge the fact that people go to, there are certain schools in this country that are challenging. You know, you got the Harvards and the Yales and the Stanfords and all that kind of stuff. They're challenging. But it's not enough to hurt people who don't go there. So I use these as tiebreakers. If a student is really on the fence between being admitted and being waitlisted, okay, the person that went to a more challenging school might get a little bit of an edge, but it's not enough to hurt the person that didn't. Same thing with the undergraduate major. I may give a little bit more weight to someone who majored in biology or chemistry or biochem or engineering. But it's an important tiebreaker. I'm not going to give that person so much credit that I'm going to somehow put someone who didn't major in engineering in jeopardy. But I do have to acknowledge that we do that. We give a little bit of weight in a tie-breaking situation. I'm going to see if it works. Okay. Remember I said before that the Lsat sometimes, I know, it's sort of a God with clay feet. God with a small g, with clay feet. You know, we built this thing up to be something that it really is. It is a good, valid, reliable predictor when used correctly of first-year law school performance. When I say used correctly, I mean used with the undergrad GPA. But it is not the be-all, end-all of life. So, at Iowa, we put about 35% of our decisions on any particular file. 35% of my decision can be based on the Lsat. 25% of my decision can be based on the GPA. 40% of my decision can be based on non-academic factors. Now look at the balance here. Let's say you totally bomb out on the Lsat. You totally blow it. But you have a really good GPA and you have really good non-academic activities. Okay, let's say you don't get any of that 35%. But you get 40, you get all of the 40% here and the 25% here. That's 65%, right? Now, that's okay, but any test I've taken where I got a 65, that was like a D. So it's okay, but it's not good enough. Same thing here. Let's say you totally bomb out on the GPA, but you have a good Lsat and good activities. That's 40 plus 35, that's 75. Well, any test I've gotten a 75 on is a C. Okay, let's take the other one. Let's say you do really well academically, so you get the full 60% here. You have a 180 Lsat and a 4.0 GPA, which essentially means you get about 60%. But just say you're a total blithering idiot to everyone. Nobody likes you, you don't like yourself, and you unfortunately let everyone know that you don't like yourself by acting like a total fool. So you totally bomb out on the non-academic factors, which I'll talk about in a second. Okay, you got the total 60%. Well, 60% is a D minus. So the way things are set up in our process is it's really hard to totally mess up on any one thing and still get in. And most schools that you apply to will have some balance. Now, to be honest with you, and this is unfortunate, I think that most schools put a little too much emphasis on the Lsat. And that's because of rankings. Rankings are one of the worst things, I think, to happen to law school admissions. Because you now have schools that are being driven more by the rankings than by their mission. Unless, of course, rankings is their mission, which then means they have to kind of remember why they're even in existence. I always have this running joke. If I totally mess up, I think they ought to hire the editor of U.S. News and World Report magazine. Since he knows so much more about marketing, admissions, and enrollment management than I do, they should just hire him. His name is Bob Morse. He's a nice guy. Actually, he is. He's an accountant by training. He's a good guy. He's just doing what he's told. But rankings don't make sense. I don't know how you can rank schools that aren't even playing the same kind of game. For example, we're a public institution, that still has to enroll 50% residents from the state of Iowa. A neighboring school, two neighboring schools, University of Illinois Law School, University of Minnesota Law School, had no requirement that they enroll any percentage of people from their respective states. And that has a huge impact on the numbers, on the quality of the pool that you get. So how you can rank schools that aren't even playing on the same field. How can you rank public schools and private schools? 40% of my budget, approximately, comes from the state of Iowa. How can you compare me to NYU? NYU in New York City is a private university. They get no money from anyone except their own private donations. And they are usually much greater. The people who donate to places like NYU and Boston College have more money, frankly, than the states do. So how you can compare schools that aren't even playing on the same field makes no sense to me. But US News has figured out a way and get paid for it. Lucky them. Okay. But the point here is that most schools that you apply to, if you decide to apply to law school, will have some kind of balance here. This happens to be ours. And unfortunately, I think this makes sense for us, because we're the kind of school that reads the whole file. But there are some schools out there that may put a little too much emphasis on the Lsat. Okay. On the previous slide, you saw that 40% of my decision is based on non-academic factors. Here are the non-academic factors. And I'll tell you how we get at these in a minute, because the Lsat and GPA tell me nothing about this stuff. Interpersonal skills, work experience, activities outside of school, career focus, motivation, empathy, and problem-solving skills. Please keep in mind, I mentioned before, that the most important academic talent you can probably have is writing. The most important goal you can have in getting a law degree is solving problems. That's ultimately why you go to grad school. To learn how to solve someone else's problem, or another entity's problems, whether it's a person, business, public policy, whatever it is. You're there to learn how to solve problems. So these are the non-academic factors that we look at. Now, the Lsat tells me what you learned basically from studying for the Lsat. It's an indication of how you did on some standardized test. GPA is an indication of what you've learned over, say, 3, 4, 5, 6-year period by attending Hodges University. Letters of recommendation, which I'll talk about in a minute, tell me how someone else feels about you. But it's only their opinion, and they don't know the entire, they don't know your life. There's something else that we need to look at to address this non-academic piece, or these non-academic pieces. And here they are. Personal statement. Personal statement is probably the second most important document in the application. The most important document in the application is this thing called the Law School Credential Assembly Service Report, LSCAS. It's the report that has your LSAT, your transcripts, your letters of recommendation. It's a big packet of information that we get from the Law School Admissions Council. If you've applied, how many have applied to law school? Okay. When you apply to law school, you'll see what the LSCAS is. So we don't want to worry about it here. But it doesn't tell me anything about your non-academic factors. That's the point. Personal statement. And I'll talk about the optional addendum in a minute. These are the key factors. The personal statement is the second most important document in the application because it gives you the opportunity to tell me what you really want me to know about you. Things that won't come out in any other part of the application because they won't. The personal statement, for many schools, takes the place of an interview. Most law schools don't interview. We don't have a lot of people in our office. I mean, I was talking to Dr. Weil before. You're looking at 1/2 of the officer level staff in my admissions office. There's only one other person. She's in Seattle, Washington, doing this kind of stuff at University of Washington right now. We don't have a lot of people in our office. And now there are some schools that have their alumni organized and all of that. We're not there yet. So for a lot of schools, the personal statement takes the place of an interview. It's your opportunity to tell us those 1 or 2 or 3 things that really stand out about you and that you really, really want us to know. So that's why you need to write a good one. Most law schools will have a limit or some guideline as to how long the personal statement ought to be. For us, it's 3 pages. If you go to 4 pages, I'm not going to bust your chops. But there are some other schools that will. There are some schools where if they say 3 pages or 1,300 word limit or whatever it is, stick to it. You are not rewarded for your creativity in managing the admissions process. You are rewarded for following the directions. A lot of people like to get creative and send in pictures of themselves, some not too flattering, but they'll send in pictures of themselves or do just really weird things, thinking they're being creative and funny, and they generally aren't. So stick to the directions that are given to you in your application packet at whatever schools you're applying to. So 2 to 3 pages, 3 pages max, 4 pages. If you get a little past 4 pages for us, that's when I start getting nervous. But the key is to tell us what you really want us to know about you. Those 1 or 2 or 3 things, where you were in an interview, and you said, okay, if this guy forgets everything about me, he's not going to forget these 3 things. I'm going to hammer these points home every chance I get because these are really, really important that he know about, or she, if it's a woman that you're interviewing with. Those are the 3 things, or 2 things, or 1 thing that goes into that personal statement. Okay? Now, the person, yes, sir.
Question over here.
Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering, how do you go about making the personal statement sound right, and where do you start?
Yeah, good question. Here's what I would do. First of all, the personal statement should focus on why you want to go to law school. So make that determination. What is it that's driving me to go to law school? The addendum should be used to tell me about obstacles that have been overcome in life, whatever those obstacles may be. And the addendum can be as personal or as non-personal as you want it to be. And it's also optional. You don't have to send in an addendum at all. But the thing is, make sure that personal statement focuses on why you want to go to law school. And here's what I would do. Here is a real quick and dirty outline on the personal statement. Here is the point that I want you to know about me. I have an unshakable self-confidence. Okay? There's like the first couple sentences. Paragraph 2. I developed that unshakable self-confidence because I worked in a very demanding function at work. Or I had to balance out a lot of different issues at home in terms of family or whatever it is. Okay? There's paragraph 2. Paragraph 3. Here's what I learned from having worked in that area and having figured out how to balance out that demanding schedule. And then the final paragraph, here's why you need to know it and why it's important for my doing well in law school.
Okay.
So tell me what that strength is about you. Tell me why it's important, or what you learned from that strength, or working within that function that gave you that strength. Tell me why we need to know about it. So what? And then tell me how it's going to make you a better lawyer, better student, better citizen, better problem solver. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
That would be probably the easiest outline I could give you. The personal statement is definitely...
I'm sorry, I didn't... Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hi, can you repeat what the first paragraph said? That's something about self-confidence?
Yes. I was just using the term self-confidence as an example of things that you want to write about. What you want to do is choose 1 or 2 or 3 things that are really important that we know about you. Do you remember the slide I showed, those non-academic factors? Interpersonal skills, work experience, all that? What a lot of people will do is use that list, and they'll choose 1 or 2 or 3 things from that list that they can connect with, things that are important for them, and the things that on that list that they want us to know about them. So what I would do is take 1 or 2 or 3 things from that list and start out talking about that point, talk about the experience that helped you develop that strength, talk about why we need to know about it, and then talk about how it's going to help you be a better lawyer, better student, better citizen, better problem solver. But I was just using,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I was just using unshakable self-confidence as off the top of my head.
Okay.
Some people will say I have great analytical skills because of some work experience, or I can work with others. If you ever want someone, there was this old joke, if you ever want to get a job with IBM, say 3 things in the interview. I'm self-motivated, I can work with others, and I have great analytical skills. If you mention that in an interview with IBM, you'll get the job. Now, I'm not sure that's true now, but back in the late 70s, when I graduated from college, that worked. Because my best friend in the world got an interview that way, and he did well with it. But hopefully I answered your question. Okay, so the personal statement should focus on why you want to go to law school. Use the addendum to talk about those character-building experiences that may not necessarily be driving you to go to law school, but it's important that we know about. Quickest, best example I have, I'll just use my own personal life experience. If you do the math in terms of, okay, this guy got out of college in the late 70s, he's an old dude. Okay, fine, I'm an old dude. But I'm also old enough to have integrated 2 schools in my life, one of which was in Hartsville, South Carolina in 1968. Now, for those of you that weren't aware of South Carolina in 1968, let me tell you, that was an experience. And I can laugh about it now, but back then it was interesting. Now, if I were applying to law school, I would not write about that experience in my personal statement because I wouldn't go to law school because I integrated 2 schools when I was a kid. Okay, you know, it's stuff I survived, and there were some weird, strange things that happened, but that's not what's driving me to go to law school. Other things are driving me to go to law school. But I would write about it in an addendum, because it would talk about, how do I put this? It would talk about my intestinal fortitude and my strength to put up with things that shouldn't happen to a human being, and my ability to work through stuff. And that would lead to those bad days in law school when you know you're going to have a tough day and you know you're not going to know what the heck you're talking about. But I had the strength to put up with it because I've dealt with worse. That's how I would parlay that integration of schools into the strength that will allow me to get through law school. So my personal statement would be, here's why I want to go to law school. But the optional addendum would be, there are some other things that I've dealt with in my life that you really need to know about, which now in hindsight had a huge impact on how internally tough I am and how I'm able to put up with a lot of baloney. See the difference? Letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendation should come from people that know you well. God's breathing or something. Don't worry about getting the letters from famous names or, you know, the governor, or current or future, or senators, or president. Don't worry about that stuff. Get the letters of recommendation from people that know you well and can speak to your talents to do well in law school. Okay? We require 2. 3 would be the max. Try not to send in more than 3 letters of recommendation. This gets back to what I said before about following the directions of the schools that you're applying to. There's this old saying in admissions, and it tends to hold up. The thicker the folder, the thicker the applicant. If I ask for a 3-page personal statement and you send me one that's 20, there's something wrong. If I ask for 3 letters of recommendation and you send me 4 or send me 6 or 7, there's something wrong. So, just keep that in mind. Be careful how much you send in. And then the third thing we look at is a resume. Just a nice, short, quick synopsis of whatever you've done professionally. Okay? All right. Which schools to apply to? And how many? I'll get to the how many in a minute. Here's what I would do. First, you have to figure out what your passion is. And then do this. Find a school, and you can go online. The LSAC website, www.lsac.org, is a really good website. I'll repeat it. www.lsac.org. It's a great website. But find a school that has a clinic, a research institute, or a scholarly publication that is in an area that you're interested in. And that may be a school that you want to check out. a clinic, a research institute, or a scholarly publication. Take a look at the career services information. If you know that you want to go to school in Florida, then it would behoove you to check out at least one school in Florida. You have a whole bunch of them. You may want to check out one or two. Now realize that to maintain accreditation, almost any school in the country can get you a job in any state in the country. But because of the location, there are some schools where it's just easier to do. And some schools have more national reputations versus regional reputations. Call the school and talk to the career services office and ask them. But you can use geography to some extent. But don't worry about, gee, there's this great school in California I want to go to that has exactly what I want, but I want to work in New York. Chances are that school either has the resources through the network of alumni and other things to get you to New York if that's where you want to end up. Do not use weather. Okay? Let me just tell you this. I've worked in the law school world now, as Dr. Weil and I were talking, for 21 years. I've been doing higher education for about 25 plus years. I've spent, except for those 3 years I spent in South Carolina, I've spent my entire life, that's 50 out of my 53 years on this earth, in the snow belt. Weather is not a big deal. If the first thing you think about when you walk into law school in the morning is the weather, you're not a good fit for law school. Just keep that in mind. You're going to be so busy with other things that weather's going to be the least of your problems. There's one thing I have in common. I'm at the University of Iowa. There's one thing I have in common with the University of Hawaii Law School. Actually, a number of things I have in common. One of the big things is, it's a partly cloudy 72 degrees in the law library. And that's where you'll be. You'll be looking at Oahu and Lake Kamanahana, whatever. You're going to be looking at it from the library. I'm just saying. Okay? Also, to the extent that U.S. News and World Report means anything, keep in mind, if those rankings are honest and truthful and accurate, 7 out of the top 10 law schools in the United States and 15 out of the top 25 are in the snow belt. So I want to see that letter that you send to Yale, Harvard, Cornell, NYU, Columbia, University of Chicago, Northwestern University, Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Georgetown, George Washington, University of Pennsylvania. There are probably one or two I'm missing. But I want to see that letter that you send to them saying, sir, I really enjoyed the intellectual curiosity that was shown in your on-campus discussion today, and I really enjoyed the fact that you, and am appreciative of the fact that you offered me admission to Harvard Law School. However, it is too cold. So therefore, I want to see that letter, right? Please, send me a copy of it. If you get into Harvard or Yale, you're going. I guarantee it. And you will figure out a way to go. Harvard and Yale are the only two schools in the United States that have a yield over 50%. By yield, I mean over 50% of the people they admit go. Only two schools in the United States with a yield over 50%. You get into Harvard or Yale, you're going. So be careful about the whole weather thing. And be careful of emphasis on rankings. Okay. I have one or two more slides. I'm going to finish up, and I have time for questions. Here's what I would do. 5 to 7 schools. I would apply to one dream school. That school where if you got in, you go. You don't have to apply to one dream school, because if you get in, you're going. So you don't have to apply to 2 or 3. You just apply to one dream school. Now you have to do some research and figure out what it is. But if you get in to that, whatever it is, University of Florida, Iowa, Harvard, Stanford, Hamlin, William Mitchell, you get into that school, you're going. That's it. Good night. Keep in touch. Tip the waiter. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. 3 possible schools where, your numbers, your academic numbers, first of all, they have what you want. Forget about academic numbers. They have what you want in terms of a clinic, a research institute, or a scholarly publication. But beyond that, your academic numbers seem to be in line with what they have. And then you apply to one fallback school. That's the school where if you died tomorrow, they'd probably admit you and give you a full ride scholarship. All right? And probably give the graduation speech, too. That'd prop you up to do something.
I think that school is.
Okay? And then, I said 5 to 7, because there may be 1 or 2 out there that, you think about at the last minute. So, but that's what I would do. 5 to 7 schools. If you apply to more than 7, you're not doing enough research. You can usually get it down to 5 to 7. Okay, final slide. And this is the final one that has any real good information on it. Basically, apply early. take whatever deadlines. I'll just use Iowa as an example. My official deadline is March 1st, but don't wait until March 1st to apply. Move that deadline up by 6 weeks. So if I say March 1st, which is what our brochures say, think January 15th. If whatever schools you're interested in, Florida, wherever it is, take that deadline and move it up by 6 weeks and try to get your application in and complete early. For the following reasons, and I kind of talked about this before. I have plenty of room available before January 15th. The decision comes earlier, so you find out earlier. Better to find out earlier, regardless of whether it's a yay or a nay. Better to find out earlier than later. More time to think about your options. Do you want to go here or there? And scholarship money is still plentiful. There's so many people apply close to that March 1st deadline, and I can admit them, but I have no more scholarship money to give them. Okay? All right. Whoops. For those interested in Iowa, there's my website. Here's me. Feel free to email me. You can try to call me, but I travel so much that having me return a phone call it may take a while. But I check my emails pretty regularly, like at least a couple of times a day. Okay? Questions?
What would be something in the application packet that would just really make someone stick out and say, that's a shining star, we want them?
Okay. Aside from
Right.
the Lsat and the GPA, a really good personal statement. There are some schools that don't put a lot of weight into the personal statement. They'll kind of read through them just to make sure that you're not a convicted axe murderer or you sacrifice kittens and some weird thing on weekends. But most schools are going to read that personal statement, and we really put a lot of emphasis on it because that is the key document where we can get to know you beyond the numbers. We're the kind of school that really tries to get to know people beyond the numbers. And we don't admit everyone. I mean, there are going to be some people that are frustrated with us, but we just don't have room. I only have 200 spots. But that personal statement is really important where that's your opportunity to step outside of yourself, to step outside of the box and say, here's why I'm doing this. I don't know how it compares to her. I don't care how it compares to him. This is me. This is why I'm doing this. That personal statement is key. That help?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
What's the number one thing one of the most important things you see a freshman coming in and not being prepared for, or in general, just something you see as an issue for most freshman students?
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing you can see. Obstacle-wise,
Yep.
or
Overconfidence. If you get into law school, I mean, you should feel confident in your abilities. But they become overly confident because they begin to realize when they get to law school that they are all of a sudden a small fish in a much larger pond, and that everyone in that pond is a big fish. And going from the big fish in a small pond to sort of an average-sized fish in a pond, that adjustment psychologically can be tough. The other thing is thinking that the workload is going to be a lot like college. One thing about law school, in law school, the final exam counts for 100% of your grade. It is not like most undergrad programs where you have a midterm, a final, class participation, a couple of lab experiments, a couple of this, a couple of that, and you have a lot of things that sort of combine to formulate your grade. In law school, the final exam is 100% of your grade. And in many undergrad programs, not all, but at many, you can kind of slide for a couple of days, maybe even a week, and then kind of catch up and be right on track. Law school, you slide for a day or two, and you're going to be in big trouble. And so procrastination, I guess maybe is the best summary word. People who procrastinate thinking that they have the ability to get over that hurts. It'll take you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in your law school experience, but you can have, say, a 3 or 4 page document that the professor will give out 8.5 by 11. In law school, it'll take you maybe 5 hours to read that thing. Because you're looking up like 4 or 5 words a sentence, especially the first month, because the words, the nomenclature, everything is new. And you're having to look up words to see what they mean and the context of how they're used. And that takes up a lot of time. Now, people do get it. My graduation rate, or my retention rate from year 1 to year 2, because law school is 3 years, my retention rate is 99%. Actually, 99.5%. I lost one person last year. I don't remember why, but one person, I think actually about a month into school, she realized she didn't want to go to law school, which I'd rather have people figure that out earlier than later. So 99.5% retention rate, 99% graduation rate, 97% placement rate, 93% bar passage rate. So we do pretty well. But that's because we look for people who understand that law school is not a joke. You're going to have to really turn it up a notch, and don't procrastinate. Final example, and I'll go to other questions. My wife is one of the smartest people I ever met. She has a really good perspective on this thing. She said, you know, there may be reasons why your students won't know what they're talking about in class. And that's okay. And she's right. They're going to be, that's why you're in school. You don't know it. If you knew it, you could just take the bar now and go on and practice law. You wouldn't have me as a client, because I want to see someone who went to law school. But, go ahead. Take the bar now and see what happens. There are going to be things that you're not going to know in class. There are going to be days when you're going to be lost. But there is no excuse for being unprepared. None. Now, my wife is the daughter of a Tuskegee Airman. My father-in-law is 87 years old and a Tuskegee Airman, retired colonel in the Air Force. He doesn't believe in taking prisoners, because that's not how if you're a black man from the 40s through the 70s and make colonel in the Air Force, you don't do it by taking prisoners. He's kind of a hard-bitten guy. But that's her philosophy in terms of getting through law school. Don't procrastinate. Always show up prepared. Do your outlines. Do your homework. Do the things that the professor tells you to do, and you'll be okay. If you don't do that, you'll be in trouble.
Just if anybody does have class, I want you to go to class now, so make sure you run off to class, okay?